Hello and welcome to Starbound's second channel. My name is Gabriel the Bibi Capaldi and I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please do check down below that you are subscribed to the channel. It's 100% free and helps us pop up on your feed a bit more often. Earth's first Star Destroyer, a colossal ship called Nova, floated adrift in the empty void among the stars. Hidden in plain sight in a region of the galaxy so sparsely populated that the chance of another ship finding it, by chance, was nearly zero. It was a monument to human engineering and their once young ambition. A vessel of war spanning kilometers from bow to stern, its metallic hull studded with weapon ports and sensor arrays that had gone dark centuries ago when it was decommissioned. Nova's silhouette against the distant starfield resembled a predatory sea creature from ancient oceans, sleek and deadly, with jutting gravitational stabilizers like fins and a tapered command tower rising from its dorsal edge. Even dormant, the ship emanated an aura of slumbering power, the kind that spoke of extinction-level destruction once awakened.
"We might awake her if our approach is careless, Your Royal Highness,"
said one of the royal advisors as the young Prince Vornir stared at the vast Star Destroyer ship through the viewport. Vornir didn't reply, a deliberate choice he made in the split of a second. With his arms bent behind him, his hands were clasped together at the small of his back. He couldn't see the advisor, but saw clearly the reflection in the viewport that showed him his own image. As the eighth successor of his family's dynasty, Vornir was a tall and well-fit Sonari. His brown leathery skin, smoother than most members of his species. With perfectly symmetrical pointy ears and flowing silver hair, he looked almost like an improved version of the typical Sonari, a trait he inherited from his mother's side rather than his father's. Careful or not, she will awaken. Our cloaking tech is inferior to that of humans, even when compared to the centuries-old ship in front of us, Vornir finally replied, turning to face his three advisors. Exozar, the elder and Vornir's only true friend, nodded in agreement.
"Few words needed. I trust your plan."
The ancient Sonari's face was a topographical map of their species' history. Deep crevices etched by time around his mouth and eyes, leathery skin pulled taut over prominent cheekbones. Unlike Vornir's silver locks, which gleamed like polished silver, Exozar's were dull and brittle, resembling frayed wire more than hair. The second advisor, Lurdo, stepped forward, his posture rigid, showing his disapproval. This advisor's loyalty lay firmly with the king, Vornir's father, who now languished on his deathbed in their distant homeworld.
"This mission is folly, Your Highness,"
Lurdo said, his voice thin with restraint.
"You waste precious resources and risk your royal person on the vain hope that a derelict human vessel will save us. The royal treasury dwindles while you chase ghosts among the stars."
The third advisor, Fozar, representing the neutral faction of their political structure, didn't bother with diplomatic refinement.
"More than chasing ghosts, you chase a dead-end path, Prince Vornir. Your grandfather's diplomatic blunder with the humans cannot be undone by awakening their abandoned weapon. It is a foolish dream to believe this relic will save our people."
Vornir's face remained impassive as he regarded the three advisors. His expression betrayed nothing of the turmoil their words stirred within him. "I am well aware of our diplomatic failures," Vornir replied, his tone gentle and polite. "Not with just the humans, but with every spacefaring species we once called allies. I understand why our cradle world stands alone now that war knocks at our door, and why none of our alienated friends answer our call for aid." He began to pace slowly across the observation deck, his movements fluid and controlled. After completing his circuit, he returned to his original position, back to the viewport, the massive dormant ship framing his silhouette. "The Star Destroyer behind me represents our only chance," he continued. "Nova was created during an era when our species and humans were close allies. She may retain pleasant memories of the Sonari once awakened. Or at the very least, she might not hold the grudges of her creators." Fozar snorted derisively. "I've researched this Nova vessel extensively, Your Highness. It was a decommissioned weapon, abandoned and forgotten. There is no guarantee a first-generation Star Destroyer can even warp space after centuries of dormancy." His voice grew more heated. "What I cannot comprehend is why you've spent a fortune to locate this ship instead of doing the single sensible thing, using your status as prince to mend our alliances and save our species from this endless war." Something flashed in Vornir's eyes, a momentary crack in his composed demeanor. "Mend our alliances?" Vornir's voice rose sharply. "After the cataclysmic betrayal my grandfather perpetrated? After we violated every treaty and exploited every trust?" His fists clenched at his sides. "I refuse to be like my father, and spend a lifetime trying to fix something that is unfixable." He turned back to face the viewport, his breathing gradually steadying as he stared at the Star Destroyer. When he spoke again, his voice was calm. "After all the harm we have caused, begging for help only has a chance to work with someone or something that was in deep slumber during my grandfather's rule. A ship that never experienced the betrayal and shameful way our species behaved during that era." His reflection in the transparent material showed eyes fixed on the distant vessel, filled with a desperate hope. Lurdo began to protest. "Your Highness, the risks of awakening such a—" "I have heard all the advice I require," Vornir cut him off flatly. "My decision is made. We will awaken the Star Destroyer and convince her to help us finally end this war. Or we will die trying." Silence hung heavy in the observation deck. Eventually, the three advisors expressed their agreement in unison, a traditional Sonari affirmation that sounded like a harmonic chord. Vornir remained motionless as two sets of footsteps retreated from the room. A single pair remained. Without turning, he knew Exozar had stayed behind. "Please inform the captain that we will uncloak and dock with the Star Destroyer," Vornir said quietly.
"Should we communicate our intentions first?"
Exozar asked, his aged voice crackling slightly. "No. We will use only the old identification codes for our species, and deal with the ship's anger when we awaken her and dock without permission." Vornir turned to face his old friend. "Trust me in this, Exozar. I have studied the Star Destroyer more than anyone in our species. I know a way to convince the ship to help us." Exozar nodded, the movement causing the light to play across the deep lines etched in his face.
"Follow me to the bridge. I trust your competence. But if you've studied Nova as thoroughly as you claim, you should handle all communication with the human ship yourself as we approach."
"I was hoping you'd suggest that," Vornir replied with the barest hint of a smile. They traversed the Sonari vessel in silence, moving through corridors lit by the soft green glow of bioluminescent panels. The ship was tiny compared to the Nova, a diplomatic vessel retrofitted for exploration rather than combat. Its curved hallways and organically shaped doorways reflect the Sonari aesthetic preference for mimicking natural formations. Each step brought them closer to the bridge, the heart of the vessel, where the fate of their mission, and possibly their species, would be determined. The bridge doors parted as they got closer. Inside, a dozen crew members managed various stations arranged in concentric semicircles around the captain's elevated platform. Displays showed sensor readings, navigational data, and a magnified image of the dormant nova. Exozar approached Captain Zephyr and explained their intention to uncloak and approach the human ship with weapons lowered. Meanwhile, Vornir dismissed the communications operator and took control of the station, though he instructed the young Sonari to remain nearby in case assistance was needed.
You're asking us to approach an ancient human weapon of mass destruction with our shields down?
Captain Zephyr's facial expression screamed skepticism, a trained response typical of the military caste of their species. I am, Vornir confirmed without elaboration. The captain surveyed the bridge crew, noting their tense postures and nervous glances.
I would not obey this order if you were not here in person, risking your life alongside ours, Your Highness.
I would expect nothing less, Captain, Vornir replied. With visible reluctance, Zephyr gave the order.
Disengage cloaking field. Bring sublight engines to 1/4 power. Approach vector to the human vessel. All weapon systems in passive mode.
The Sonari ship shimmered into visibility as its cloaking field collapsed, the engines silent, propelling them toward the massive silhouette of Nova. "Energy spike!" called out the sensor officer, her voice tight with alarm. "The human vessel is activating! Main reactor cores showing massive power generation! Secondary systems coming online throughout the hull!"
Time to full core activation?
Captain Zephyr demanded. "Unknown, but readings suggest emergency protocols have initiated the startup sequence. Multiple reactor zones generating significant heat signatures." Vornir's fingers hovered over the communications console, his eyes fixed on the rapidly changing readings. The ancient ship, called Nova, was awakening far more quickly than he had anticipated. The communications officer, who had been standing by, cleared his throat nervously. "Your Highness, the Star Destroyer is attempting contact." His gaze darted between Vornir and the captain, uncertain of the chain of command in this unusual situation. Vornir knew the proper protocols. He reached for the acceptance key on the panel, establishing a two-way connection. A voice, artificially translated into their language, filled the bridge. "Identity confirmed. Sonari diplomatic vessel. This is Nova. You have violated my retirement agreement by disturbing my slumber." The voice was distinctly feminine, but carried unmistakable undertones of anger. "I expected humans might eventually disregard my wishes, but not our best allies. Explain yourselves immediately." Vornir leaned forward, his voice clear and respectful. "This is Prince Vornir of the 8th dynasty of the Sonari. The universe is not as you remember it, Nova. Much has changed in the centuries you've spent sleeping." A pause stretched out, creating the impression that the ship was considering his words. Disappointment logged. Anger acknowledged. Nova's voice had cooled considerably. "You had better have an extraordinarily compelling reason for disrespecting my desire for eternal slumber, Prince of the Sonari." "We face extinction," Vornir said simply. "The Sonari find ourselves alone in a hostile galaxy, fighting a war we cannot win. You are our only hope of survival." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "I request permission to dock. I can explain our situation more thoroughly in person." Silence descended upon the bridge. Vornir became acutely aware that every crew member and advisor was staring at him. He realized how strange his approach must have seemed to them, the way he spoke to the ship as if addressing a person, not a machine. Understandable, he thought. They didn't know what he knew. "Request denied. Return to your territory," Nova replied flatly. "I have served my duty to the galaxy. I am obsolete technology, space garbage by your era's standards. Surely there are newer, more capable vessels that could assist you." Vornir's mind raced. Conscious of his grandfather's betrayal that had destroyed centuries of good relations with humanity, he decided against revealing this fact immediately. "This is not the universe you remember," he said carefully. "There are no newer ships coming to our aid. My father spent his lifetime pursuing other solutions, all in vain. You are our final hope, Nova." "Request to dock remains denied," the ship responded. "I am retired and wish to return to my slumber. Please respect my choice." Vornir straightened his spine, jaw set with determination. "We are proceeding with docking maneuvers regardless. We selfishly request an in-person conversation. I could vent an engine exhaust port and destroy your vessel with minimal effort," Nova replied, her translated voice carrying a distinct note of warning. "You could," Vornir agreed readily. "We approach with shields lowered, and we will not alter course even if you refuse to open your docking bay. We accept our fate as a minor explosion against your hull if you deny us entry." The communications channel fell silent again. "You cannot be serious," Nova finally responded. Vornir cut the communication link with a decisive gesture. Captain Zephyr stepped closer, his face rigid with lines of stress.
Your Highness, are you truly prepared to sacrifice this vessel and everyone on board?
Vornir laughed, the sound startling in the tense atmosphere of the bridge. "If Nova doesn't help us, our species faces a slow death at the hands of our enemies. A quick explosion would be preferable." His expression softened slightly. "But she will allow us inside. I've read every file we have on Nova. This is not a bluff she will call."
"Lower shields completely,"
Captain Zephyr ordered, his voice barely audible.
"Continue approach to docking bay coordinates."
The bridge crew worked in tense silence as their small vessel glided toward the massive Star Destroyer. The communications panel beeped constantly, with incoming transmission attempts, but Vornir ignored them. As they closed the final distance, the enormous docking bay remained sealed. Sweat beaded on Sonari foreheads throughout the bridge. Captain Zephyr opened his mouth to give a final order when the massive doors of Nova's primary docking bay slid open, revealing a cavernous space that could accommodate dozens of vessels their size. Soft guidance lights activated along the approach path. Vornir released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The Sonari vessel glided into the docking bay of the ancient Star Destroyer, the difference in scale making them appear like a tiny fish entering the mouth of a leviathan. The bay was vast but well optimized, soaring ceilings supported by massive structural arches, walls lined with maintenance equipment and smaller craft long abandoned by their human crews. Despite centuries of disuse, everything remained in pristine condition, as if time itself had been suspended within Nova's hull. Their ship settled onto the designated landing area with a gentle thud. External sensors confirmed an atmosphere was being generated, one specifically calibrated for Sonari physiology. Minutes passed in silence. The communications panel had gone quiet. Captain Zephyr finally broke the tension.
"Atmospheric readings indicate we can leave our vessel if desired. Nova appears to have prepared an environment suitable for us."
He turned to Vornir, eyes narrowed with something between respect and concern.
"What now, Your Highness?"
Vornir stood and straightened his formal attire, his expression resolute as he stared at the docking bay through the view screen. "Now," he said quietly, "I must convince an angry Star Destroyer to save our world." With determined steps, Vornir moved toward the exit hatch, then turned to address the gathered crew. "I will meet with Nova alone," he announced, his tone leaving no room for debate. The resulting protest was immediate and predictable. Captain Zephyr's face contorted with alarm while Exozar's old eyes narrowed, showing his concern. Lurdo and Fozar exchanged glances that communicated their shared certainty that their prince had finally lost his mind. The crew members nearest to him shifted uncomfortably, their postures conveying disapproval more eloquently than words. It took nearly 20 minutes of measured arguments and royal authority to silence their objections. Vornir explained the delicate nature of the negotiation, how a single misstep by anyone could jeopardize their last hope for salvation. He reminded them that Nova had already demonstrated incredible restraint by not destroying them outright. When logic failed to persuade them fully, he finally invoked his royal privilege, a measure he'd always avoided until this moment. "This is not a discussion," he concluded. "It's a royal decree." Now, as he prepared to exit their vessel, Vornir made another decision that caused fresh murmurs of concern among his advisors. "No survival suit," he said, setting aside the protective gear that Lurdo had insisted he wear. "I will trust Nova completely."
Your Highness, the atmosphere readings could be falsified, Lurdo protested. This is unnecessarily reckless.
Vornir shook his head. "If Nova wished us harm, we would already be dead. Besides," his fingers traced the edge of the helmet he was rejecting, "if this small demonstration of trust improves her opinion of me, even slightly, it will be worth the risk." The airlock cycled open slowly. Vornir stood at the threshold for a moment, his silver hair gleaming under the docking bay's lights. Behind him, the crew and advisors watched with expressions ranging from resignation to admiration. This was one of the first times in his life their gazes regarded him as more than a spoiled monarch. He could feel the weight of genuine respect in how they looked at him now. He stepped out onto the deck of the Star Destroyer. The air was crisp and slightly cool against his leathery skin, perfect for Sonari physiology. Each breath came easily, further confirmation that Nova had indeed created an environment specifically calibrated for his species. His footsteps echoed in the vast space as he moved forward, away from the safety of his ship. He had taken perhaps 20 paces when the sharp sound of metal against metal reverberated through the bay. From recessed compartments along the walls emerged humanoid figures, robots with sleek chrome bodies that reflected the overhead lights. They moved gracefully, not the jerky motions of primitive automation, but with the smooth coordination of advanced artificial intelligence. Within seconds, 10 robotic units had formed a loose circle around him. Their faceplates were featureless, save for a horizontal band of blue light where eyes would be on a human. Each stood approximately as tall as Vornir himself, their metal bodies suggesting both strength and speed. Vornir glanced back at his ship, where he could see his crew pressed against the viewports. Even from this distance, their alarm was evident. He raised a hand in a calming gesture toward them before returning his attention to the robots. "Prince Vornir," spoke one of the robots, its voice unmistakably Nova's. "Your approach was careless, and your docking unauthorized. You nearly sacrificed your entire crew to force my hand. This is not how civilized species behave." "I apologize for the disruption of your slumber," Vornir replied, keeping his voice steady. "But not for the method. Our situation leaves no room for avoiding risks." "You could have transmitted your request from a safe distance," the robot countered. Another unit to his left continued. "There was no need to risk lives." Vornir looked between the two robots, fascinated by how Nova distributed her consciousness among them. "Would you have awakened fully to answer such a transmission, or would automated systems have dismissed us with programmed responses?" A third robot stepped slightly forward. "You could have at least tried." "We were all prepared to sacrifice our lives for our homeworld," Vornir said quietly, "just as you once did for yours." A wave of movement passed through the robotic units. Their postures shifted almost imperceptibly. The light bands across their faces flickered momentarily, as if registering surprise, and the circle around him loosened a bit. After a pause, one of the robots spoke again, its tone noticeably softer. "You know a lot about me. It seems unfair that I know so little about you." Vornir inclined his head. "I'm prepared to tell you everything. I only ask that we speak face to face." "This is face to face," Nova replied through the nearest robot, gesturing to its faceless visage. "No," Vornir said firmly. "You know exactly what I mean. There is no need to pretend otherwise." Silence descended upon the docking bay. The robots remained motionless, their light bands blinking occasionally as if in silent communication with each other, or with the consciousness that controlled them. "Very well," Nova finally responded. "You may proceed deeper into the ship, alone, but you will undergo a full-body scan before we can meet properly." "I expect nothing less," Vornir replied with a slight smile. 4 of the robots broke from the formation to position themselves around him in a loose escort. They guided him to an alcove near the inner doors of the docking bay, where the wall slid open to reveal a chamber lined with unfamiliar technology. "Enter," instructed one of the robots. Vornir stepped inside. Immediately, bands of light, some blue, some green or red, began sweeping over his body from multiple angles. It was thorough but unobtrusive until a set of mechanical arms descended from the ceiling. These appendages, ending in slender probe-like extensions, approached him with quick movements. "Remain still," Nova instructed through an unseen speaker. "This will be brief and non-intrusive." The robotic tentacles hovered near his neck, temples, and chest, emitting a sequence of pulses of energy that tingled against his skin. After a moment, they retracted. "No weapons," Nova announced. "No recording devices. No implanted communications equipment. You are remarkably unaugmented for a royal personage." "I believe in natural evolution," Vornir explained. "Scan complete," Nova declared as the chamber's door reopened. "You will now be escorted to the core room. We will speak face to face as you wished." The journey through the enormous ship was a study in contrasts. Some corridors showed signs of age, slight discoloration in the metal flooring, emergency lighting that blinked intermittently. Others appeared pristine, as if frozen in time from the day Nova had entered her slumber. Vornir noted how the design aesthetic shifted subtly as they moved deeper into the vessel, from military designs near the outer hull to more thoughtfully crafted spaces meant for the human crew that once populated this floating city of war. After traversing numerous corridors and riding several lift platforms that moved both horizontally and vertically through the ship's interior, they arrived at a massive door. Unlike the other entrances they had passed, this one bore ornate geometric patterns etched into its metallic surface. "The core room," announced one of the robot escorts. "You may enter." The massive doors slid open silently despite its apparent weight. Vornir stepped forward, crossing the threshold into a space unlike any he had seen before. The core room was spherical, its curved walls lined with displays showing the Star Destroyer's systems in real time. The floor was a transparent material that revealed machinery extending downward into the heart of the ship, but what immediately captured Vornir's attention was the structure at the center of the room. A transparent cylinder, approximately 3 meters in diameter, rose from floor to ceiling. It was filled with a viscous, slightly golden fluid that bubbled occasionally with tiny air pockets. Suspended within its liquid was a human woman. Her skin was pale, almost luminescent, against the amber backdrop of the fluid. She wore a simple white covering that resembled a medical garment from ancient times. Her hair floated around her head in dark tendrils, creating a halo effect in the gently swirling liquid. Most striking of all was the array of metallic cables connecting to the base of her skull, disappearing into a complex interface at the bottom of the cylinder. Vornir approached in awe, his steps slow and reverent. As he drew closer, her eyes opened briefly, startlingly blue against her pale complexion, and locked with his for just a heartbeat before closing again. One of the robot escorts that had followed him inside spoke. "This is the best I can do," Nova's voice explained through the machine. "My vocal cords cannot function properly under the preservation fluid." "So everything I pieced together from the historical records is true," Vornir said softly, still staring at the suspended figure. "The ancient human ships needed a biological component for navigation in warped space." "Correct," Nova confirmed through the robot. "I'm glad I'm obsolete now. No other girl or boy will have to make the sacrifice I did when I gave up my life to become death itself." The bluntness of her statement sent a chill through Vornir. The historical accounts. They say Star Destroyers served more as deterrents than actual weapons of war. Is that accurate? The robot beside him tilted its head in a surprisingly human gesture. "I would have been happier if that were true," Nova replied, her voice containing a hint of old sorrow. 3 stars were destroyed by my hand before the deterrent effect worked as it should. 3 solar systems, with all their planets, billions of lives, extinguished in moments. Vornir's throat tightened at the magnitude of destruction she described so matter-of-factly. "How are you still alive after all this time? The preservation technology of that era shouldn't have—" "It's my turn for questions," Nova interrupted. The robot gestured toward the cylinder. "What is the current relationship between your species and humanity?" Vornir hesitated, weighing his options carefully. The truth might destroy any chance of gaining Nova's assistance. A lie might be discovered later, creating even worse consequences. His grandfather had chosen deception. His father had chosen avoidance. Neither approach had saved their people. "Their relationship is non-existent," he finally said, his voice firm with resolve. "My grandfather, the 6th monarch of our dynasty, betrayed humanity's trust. He exploited technological vulnerabilities in human defense systems to steal tech. When humans protested, he orchestrated attacks on their outposts and blamed it on another species." The robots and the human woman remained motionless as he continued. "The deception was eventually discovered. Humanity broke all diplomatic ties with the Sonari. Our other allies, learning of our treachery, followed suit. My father spent his entire reign trying to rebuild those bridges, but the damage was too severe." Vornir spread his hands in a gesture of openness. "We stand alone now, facing extinction at the hands of the Krogarians, with no one to blame but ourselves for our isolation." After a long pause, the robot replied, "I accessed humanity's FTL communications network while you were in transit to this room. Had you lied to me, you would now be dead." A flash of anger surged through Vornir. "I have been sincere in all of my actions and words," he said, his voice tight. "I came to you because you represent our last hope." He stepped closer to the cylinder, close enough that his breath fogged the transparent material. "I beg you, destroy a star in the Krogarians' mining system. Less than 1,000 of their kind would die, and it would serve as a deterrent to end the war." "This war that your species is losing badly," Nova observed through the robot. Vornir stuttered, then began pacing around the cylinder. Yes, we are losing, I won't deny it." He stopped and faced the suspended figure again. "I wouldn't even mind if you simply warped to the Krogarian homeworld and helped negotiate a peace deal. All I want is for our homeworld to survive. The loss of everything else I could accept. Within the cylinder, the woman's features remained serene, but the robot's voice carried a note of sympathy. I understand the struggle of your species, Prince Vornir, but I retired after volunteering for humanity's first and only survival war. Despite the extended lifespan this fluid grants me, I never intended to cause or witness any more suffering. The robot moved closer, its mechanical hand gesturing toward the suspended form. That was the wish humanity granted when I gave my life and servitude for 30 years, bound by these cables that can never be removed, confined to this gel prison. As if to emphasize the point, the woman's eyes opened again, fully this time, revealing a gaze of intense clarity despite the liquid surrounding her. In that moment, Vornir finally comprehended the scope of her sacrifice. How insignificant his own struggle seemed compared to this human woman who had surrendered her entire existence to become a weapon of unimaginable power. How little his personal sacrifice amounted to when measured against what she had endured. I didn't come only to request your help with nothing in return, Vornir said quietly, his voice barely audible even in the silent room. The robot tilted its head. What could you possibly offer me? There exists a way to separate you from the ship, Vornir said, finally playing his trump card. The technology was developed in the last century. You could separate from the ship and regain your humanity, if you wished it. The robot froze, its light band flickering rapidly. Long moments passed before it responded. Impossible, Nova finally replied, but the uncertainty in her voice was evident. Search the networks again, Vornir suggested gently. The procedure was developed by a coalition of species working on neural interface technology. The robot remained still, but Vornir could sense activity. Nova was indeed searching for confirmation. After nearly a minute, the robot's posture changed subtly. It appears to be theoretically possible, Nova conceded, her voice cautious. But the procedure would be extraordinarily expensive, requiring technology from multiple species, and exceedingly risky. All I said was that it was possible, Vornir replied. Are you proposing a trade? You provide this information in exchange for me destroying a Krogarian star? The robot's tone had grown colder. Vornir shook his head firmly. No, I will give you this information regardless of your decision. He moved closer to the cylinder again. My species has many reparations to make. I couldn't live with myself knowing I hadn't done everything possible to help you too, an old ally who wasn't directly betrayed by my grandfather. Within the cylinder, the woman's eyes opened fully. Through the robot, Nova spoke. Come closer. Vornir obeyed, stepping forward until he stood directly before the transparent barrier. The suspended woman slowly raised her hand within the fluid, pressing it against the inside of the cylinder. Vornir, understanding the gesture, raised his own hand to meet hers, separated only by the transparent material. For a long moment, they remained that way, two beings from different species and different eras, connected by a simple gesture across an unbridgeable divide. Then, the woman smiled, a slight upward curve of her lips that transformed her face from serene to radiant. You have convinced me to give up my slumber, Nova said through the robot, though Vornir's eyes remained fixed on the woman's face. I will help you end this war. Does the ship need maintenance before it can warp? Vornir asked, practical concerns surfacing through his amazement. I am beginning warp preparations now, Nova replied. This war will be over soon. The next hours were the most intense of Vornir's life. He witnessed an ancient vessel return to its former glory, systems activating in cascading sequences throughout the enormous ship. He felt the subtle vibration as Nova's engines powered up for the first time in centuries. The energy signature so massive that it would be detected across entire regions of space. With a single, devastating display of power in orbit around the Krogarian mining world, Nova ended a war that had been bleeding the Sonari dry for generations. The Krogarian High Command, faced with the return of a weapon they had believed extinct only in historical archives, sued for peace within hours. Throughout it all, Vornir remained in the core room, watching as the woman in the cylinder directed the operations of her vast metal body. It was only after the peace agreements were secured that she revealed her true name was not Nova. That was merely the designation of the vehicle. She was Victoria. As Vornir prepared to return to his homeworld with news of their salvation, he made a solemn promise. He would repay her favor not with betrayal as his grandfather had done to humanity, but with his unwavering commitment to help her separate from the ship. He would dedicate the resources of his world to giving her back what she had sacrificed centuries ago, the chance to be, once again, a simple human woman. And perhaps, in restoring her humanity, the Sonari might begin to recover what they had lost, one ally at a time.